Welcome to the Tuesday, June 27th, 2023 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan?
Present.
Director Coleman?
Present.
Director Lenny?
Here.
Director McIntosh?
Here.
Director Patterson?
Present.
Director Young?
Here.
President Katz?
Here. Public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will also be heard now when the item is up for consideration. Madam Secretary, are there any hands for public comment online?
I have one hand for public comment. Lana Coleman. And I will be unmuting your mic. You should be able to unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and your 3 minutes start now.
Okay, my statement is about 600 words, so it may approach 4 minutes, but I'd rather speak with sincerity than speed. So given an apparently limited number of speakers, I ask to be allowed to please complete my statement that I will begin now. Thank you. I am here despite the anxiety it causes me greatly, because you apparently need to hear again what I have to say, sadly. You continue to ignore your responsibility outlined in your own ethics policy to investigate and remedy wrongdoing at the district. I've identified 10 human resources or other employees who improperly represented your retirement ordinance and have reported serious misconduct by the general counsel and manager of employee services and likely by the HR attorney. It was December when I presented then President Lenny with accusations of wrongdoing relative to the retirement ordinance, and the cover-up orchestrated by the general counsel was launched. The longer it goes, the worse and more visible your offense. I'm aware, not from John Coleman, of the $8 million awarded to the plaintiffs in a civil rights lawsuit last week. Wrongdoing at the district warrants board attention, period, not just when there are millions of dollars at stake. The little guy, which in this instance is me, doesn't get your attention. Does wrongdoing speak to you there on your literal and figurative elevated platform of power only if there are high financial stakes? You're not the ones who committed wrongdoing. You have nothing to fear from the mandated investigation. The damage has been done primarily by your general counsel, who needlessly and neglectfully behaved in a way that turned my life upside down and has caused my health to deteriorate significantly. But you're ignoring your responsibility to end his cover-up. Public documents of the findings in the multi-million-dollar case include retaliation. That's something I haven't yet brought to your attention. John was elected board president at the first meeting in January 2023. He stepped down at the first board meeting in February. Do you think he just changed his mind? Hardly. There was retaliation in between those meetings. The genesis and extent of the retaliation isn't known to me, but also needs to be investigated, as do the general counsel's misrepresentations of the code that addresses settlements with directors of government agencies. His explanation differs significantly from that of the enforcement agency, the FPPC. Along with this, were there Brown Act violations, accidental or otherwise, in the plot to replace John?
You
Or was
have
it
20
accomplished
seconds.
via attorney-client privileged emails intended to keep details hidden? I don't know, but these are topics for investigation. I will skip a paragraph about the joint closed session meeting where the general counsel failed to disclose relevant facts and only did selective disclosure. You are required to initiate an investigation. Either comply with your board ethics policy or consider whether you should resign. Being complacent and complicit with a cover-up is not a choice. In this situation, the investigation must be externally managed. The offices of the GC, GM, or Human Resources cannot be involved with selecting the investigator or in managing the investigation or findings in any way. What can possibly be your problem with doing this? If nothing unethical or negligent occurred, that will be determined and EBMUD will be vindicated. Last paragraph, will one of you please tell me why you are not initiating this mandated investigation? Anyone? How would you answer if it was the grand jury holding your ethics policy in front of you and asking this question? Please explain to me and the employees of East Bay Mud why you are looking the other way. And by state law, you can comment briefly.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. I will respond to you in writing.
That will be a first and be appreciated. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, are there any additional comments online?
No additional comments online. You do have one, you have two public comments in person. You have George Cleveland and then Yvette Rivera.
Okay, I have
Second.
George Cleveland's card.
Sure how to follow that. I'm George Cleveland. I'm the Chief Steward of Local 2019. Brief comment. For the past 5 years, our new business office has been trying to be properly compensated for the work that they do, and it's still in progress. It was hindered by delays. It's the offer that's on the table from management is insufficient and doesn't recognize the work that they do, and my phone is ringing. Anyhow, sorry about that. That's basically it. We've received their latest offer and it's weak. The group is going to give a presentation to the board at the next board meeting in public comment, but I just wanted to relay to you our disappointment that, well, I find it odd that it was tied to the rates, the potential increase in salary for our folks, and yet somehow we can fund a completely new position at a much higher level of pay than what these folks are getting to deal with, make sure that we are helping our customers get their customer assistance program discounts and things of that nature. So it's just sad, and our management needs to do better, needs to have clearer lines of communication because we're not even sure who has the final decision on this topic. We were told it was the director of HR and the general manager, and then we were told that it wasn't. So it's a problem. It needs to be fixed. We need to treat our folks with a bit more respect, especially it's one of the groups that brings in a lot of money to East Bay Mud. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay.
The next speaker is Yvette Rivera.
I'm sorry, can we have a memo, Mr. General Manager, about George's comments?
I can provide a memo. Right now, I just want to share, I believe, I'll check with the HR staff, but I think HR is still meeting with the unions, but we can provide an update.
All right.
Okay. 3 minutes start now.
Thank you. I spoke at 2 meetings this morning, and I announced the jury's, the Saji Pierce Ariel Bland trial outcome of the jury awarding Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland approximately $8 million. On top of that, Craig Spencer has to pay punitive damages of $375,000 per each person, Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce. I handed out documents to everyone that everyone should, in morning meetings and in this meeting, that everyone now should have. One was, there are 4, Saji Pierce determination response in 2019. This could have ended in 2019 if this board would have considered Jan Duffy's list of East Bay Mud Board of Director failures, but you didn't. Instead, a couple of years ago, when I heard about the case, I came and spoke to the board about it. One of the things that Director Linney said was that there were no allegations that, warranted any kind of result. The other thing was, I begged this board, practically begged this board not to give Craig Spencer an award until the outcome of this trial happened. I'm going to play the 2 minutes of that recording right now.
Sergeant Pierce, and I'll be continuing with reading from this lawsuit in future board meetings. Thank you.
All right. I just want to add that we cannot comment on ongoing litigation. However, the district takes any allegations of discrimination seriously. The district has thoroughly reviewed the facts and believes these allegations are unfounded. We are deeply committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to ensuring that the district fosters a work environment in which all employees feel respected, supported, and valued. Risha.
I really don't know. This is now my comments, my opinions. I really don't know what Director Linney meant when he spoke of renewed commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity, but I certainly had no idea that it would entail prematurely giving an award to someone that was named in a civil rights lawsuit that allegedly states he engaged in racial bias, discrimination, and retaliation.
You have 20 seconds.
To this board of directors, imagine how many people at East Bay MUD have resigned after experiencing gender and racial bias from some supervisors and managers at East Bay MUD. Imagine how many people of color and women subjected to racial or gender bias have received unwarranted counselings that could not be appealed. Imagine how many warning letters to people of color and women that reference those unappealable counseling letters have been written by supervisors and managers at East Bay MUD that have racial or gender bias. Imagine how many people haven't been mentored, how many people have gotten breaks or training on the side because of racial or gender bias. Imagine how many people did not get disability accommodations because of racial, gender, or disability bias. Go ahead and imagine it. For many of us at East Bay MUD, we don't have to imagine it because we have been subjected to it. In my opinion, to move forward on passing agenda item number...
Please begin to wrap up. Your time is up.
This is my last line.
Okay, go ahead.
In my opinion, to move forward on passing agenda number 9 to commemorate the service of Craig Spencer, given the current litigation in U.S. federal court against East Bay MUD, Mr. Spencer and Ms. Acosta, would be a slap in the face to all victims of discrimination and retaliation at East Bay MUD. Thank you.
I yield.
Are there any further comments from the public? Seeing none, we will now convene to conference room 8 to discuss closed session agenda items. We are scheduled to return for the regular meeting at 1:15 p.m. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 27th, 2023 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. We will receive reports from this morning's Sustainability and Finance Administration Committees under item 14. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Here. Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Linney. Here. Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Young.
Here.
Director Patterson.
Here.
President Katz.
Here, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are no announcements required from closed session. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments?
I have one hand for public comment. Moment. And I believe that's George Cleveland.
Thank you. I'll just read some brief instructions. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation, if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during public comment. If we need this information, we will have you contact staff. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allotted time has concluded. We'll begin with George Cleveland.
Your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Thank you, President Katz and members of the board. I am speaking to you in my role as the president of the Reigning Pride LGBTQIA+ affinity group here at the district. Surprisingly, it's almost the end of Pride Month. It went by very quickly. I wanted to let you know that our events have been very well received this year. It's quite excellent, actually. Plenty of participation in all of them. The kickoff, where we had a wonderful guest speaker from the Oakland City Council. We had our hat decorating event over at Adeline that attracted a good crowd. The tie-dye that we had this past Saturday at Oakport was wonderful. We had our drag bingo, which was very well attended and extremely competitive. We've had great success with our weekly trivia questions. And last but certainly not least, coming up Thursday, day after tomorrow, from 12 noon until 2 p.m. is the annual Pride Month potluck. It's the first one we've had in 4 years because of COVID, and it will be on the 4th floor terrace in the cafeteria. We're going to have a good amount of food, some music, decorations. And if you who are in the room are in the office on Thursday, I wholeheartedly ask you to come join us and celebrate, because it is, something important to celebrate for something we haven't done in quite some time due to circumstances beyond our control. And the other thing that was a big hit at all locations is the jigsaw puzzles. Apparently, we have a segment of our workforce who's really into completing the puzzles. And so we brought 3 to start off with. I think we're up to like a dozen that have been completed. So it's a good thing. So the month has gone well, and I appreciate you listening to me and allowing me to speak in public comment about this. And again, I hope to see you at the Pride Potluck this Thursday, 12 noon to 2 p.m., 4th floor cafeteria and the terrace. Thank you very much.
I would like to comment super briefly on that. If we have a lot of employees who are into puzzles, I would suggest a Rubik's Cube competition, speed competition.
All right, well, that's something we could add to next year's celebration during the month, or we could have it at any point for any affinity group, because that transcends boundaries. But that's a great idea, Director Chan. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing the closing events with us. I look forward to joining you this Thursday.
Very good. Thank you, Director Katz.
I'll be there.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Are there any other hands for public comment online?
No other hands for public comment online.
Do we have any speaker cards?
You have 1 speaker card?
Okay,
Director Chan?
you could read the name of the card?
Yes, that is Yvette Rivera.
Thank you.
In the
Please
room.
come up and speak.
Good morning. Your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. At all the board meetings today, I provided an update about the Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland civil rights lawsuit against Craig Spencer, Laura Costa, and EBMUD. The jury decided last Thursday that they were going to award the plaintiffs $8 million. In addition, Craig Spencer's portion of punitive damages is supposed to be $375,000 to each plaintiff. I don't know if this board is going to pay his fee, but I'm looking forward to looking at all of that documentation in a public record request. At the 11 o'clock meeting, I played a recording of me begging this board, I want to say begging because I was, begging this board not to give Craig Spencer an award, a service award, after Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland filed a civil rights lawsuit. After months of me reading from those tort complaints and those court filings, I asked this board to wait until the trial was over, or to wait until the proceedings were over before you gave that man an award. Well, this morning at the 11 o'clock meeting, I played my pleading, and now I'm going to play what Director Linney said. I omitted everybody else's comments. I'll place that on YouTube. But I think it's important that the public hears Mr. Linney's comments.
Costa would be a slap in the face to all victims of discrimination and retaliation at East Bay Mud. Thank you.
So that's when I said,
Have a resolution commending Craig Spencer's service as general counselor. After 26 years of service, General Counsel Craig Spencer is retiring from the district. His official retirement date is September 1st, 2021. But today is our opportunity to formally thank Craig for his legal guidance over the years, and specifically in the areas of strategic planning, water rights, water quality, finance, rates and charges, and environmental stewardship. Additionally, Craig's strong negotiation and litigation skills have been beneficial to the district and its ratepayers. Some of his accomplishments are enumerated in the resolution before the board today. However, before we make a motion to adopt the resolution, welcome any comments from the board. And Craig, I just want to add too that I've just appreciated your clear explanations of complex legal situations that we've confronted. And I had forgotten about the Wells Fargo work, but that was really outstanding and made me proud to be an East Bay MUD board member. In the grander sense of the role that we tend to play or we can play in the larger stage. I've always admired your strategic mind in terms of litigation and in terms of positioning the East Bay MUD to protect ourselves and to also be a voice for right and good.
Ms. Barbera, your 3 minutes have concluded, so if you can wrap up your comment.
In addition to being general counsel.
Thank you. I just want to end by saying I'm going to be taking this show on the road. I'm going to go to the state of California, and I'm going to go to DC and go to public meetings. I'm going to wait until I get the trial transcripts and everybody's testimony so that I can play it on YouTube and in these board meetings. Thank you, I yield.
Are there any other public comments?
No other public comment.
Okay, we move to the consent calendar, items 1 through 11. Are there any comments from members of the public on consent calendar items?
I move items 1 through 11.
Moved by Vice President McIntosh and seconded by Director Patterson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstain, it's unanimous. We will now move to determination and discussion, items 12 through 13. General Manager.
Yes, so last,
Actually, I'm sorry. I would like to just recognize that I have added a standby, she's not here, I don't think, standby officer to my list, Crystal Zermino, a passionate justice advocate, longtime associate in various ways in Oakland, to be my standby member here in Ward 3. I'm still recruiting one other one.
Crystal is actually online.
Oh, Crystal, do you want to just say something?
And, yeah,
She's got her hand raised.
yes, you should be able to unmute your mic, Crystal?
I think I'm unmuted.
Yes.
My apologies for not being there today. I actually found myself to be ill this morning and didn't want to get everybody sick, but I super appreciate the opportunity and really respect the work that this board is doing and all of the staff, and don't anticipate nor hope that the need would arise for me to be stepping into that position, but would take with it a great sense of responsibility to the whole community of Oakland and making sure that there's real equity in any crisis for our city. And thank you, Marguerite. Really appreciate again the opportunity. And sorry I wasn't able to be there.
Thank you, Crystal.
Director Coleman.
Welcome, Crystal. Question, Marguerite has another slot to fill. How many, I was one who pushed this, I think, back in 2017. How many slots are left by how many directors? There's a reason we put this in place.
But I've had 3 people that have ended up conflicting out for various reasons.
Sure.
So I've been trying, but.
No, I'm not saying, I was just wondering if there's others, that's all.
I
Not
think
who
there are.
specifically, but how many empty spots there may be.
There are currently 2 vacancies in Ward 7 and 1 vacancy in Ward 6.
Okay.
And the standby officers are reaffirmed at the end of the year. And so at that time, some have already, one has already let us know that they will serve out 2023 and will not be reaffirmed in '24. And so we'll find out more when I contact the standby officers in October.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know how much the staff is aware what the purpose of this is, but we have no idea if we could run into a climatic issue that's earth-shaking, I mean earthquake, or whatever the case could be, where if we can't meet, we need people who are qualified to sit in our place to make the decisions in order to run the district. And so I just, it's something that I believed in, and I was very happy that the board supported me in 2017 on this.
Yeah, there was a bit of a problem with the transition between Frank and I. I thought that the people who were going to support him would support me, but 1 out of 3 did. But John, I understand what you're saying, and I will work on this. I have been, but it's not easy.
I believe it, because you have to do Form 700 and, all that other sort of stuff.
Commitment.
Yeah.
And, they're not lifetime appointments, but so all of our seats have at least one standby officer sworn in.
Yes, all of the seats have one. The requirements are that you have 2 standby officers within the ward and 1 standby officer outside the ward. And in one of the wards, we only have a standby officer who is outside of the ward.
But he is really good.
Whatever which ward that is.
I have lots of confidence in him.
And just a reminder that the standby officers will only be called to serve if a board member cannot be found or is deceased. And it's up to the board if you have, it's up to the board to even call a standby officer to serve in a dire emergency. And there are some other stipulations that need to be in place before you can even call a standby officer to serve.
For clarification, if one of us were to pass, doesn't mean the standby officer steps in.
Correct.
Unless there's a emergency of some sort.
Correct.
Yeah, and the incapacitation has to be caused by the emergency.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you for introducing yourself to the new standby officer, and it's also, many of us have folks who are getting to know the district, and we're certainly engaging a lot more than other neighboring agencies. Okay, well, let's move to items 12 through 13. General Manager Chan.
Yeah, so speaking of emergencies, last year in April and December, 2 district emergencies were declared to repair the interceptors for the wastewater system. Today, we have a resolution to end those emergencies. That's items 12.1 and 12.2. Brian Dunstan, Senior Civil Engineer, will share with you the work that was performed and the cost to make those repairs. Brian.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Brian Dunstan. I'm a senior civil engineer in the Wastewater Engineering Division. I'm here to review the resolutions to close out 2 emergency declarations for interceptor repairs. For our agenda, I'll first provide some background, then I'll review the corrosion and repairs at each site, followed by what we are doing next regarding interceptors. And finally, we'd like to acknowledge the many people that helped to get all this work done in the last year. To start, I'll provide some background. The board actually ratified 3 emergency declarations for the interceptor repairs in 2022. The first emergency declaration was closed in March last year. This emergency addressed the sinkhole in the Coliseum parking lot earlier in January. Later that month, a second sinkhole was discovered, and the second emergency declaration was ratified at the April 12th board meeting. The third emergency was ratified at the December 13th board meeting when we discovered a localized area of extreme corrosion, this time on the North Interceptor in Berkeley. All the work included in these last 2 emergency declarations has now been completed, and we are here today to recommend that the board ratify the proposed resolutions ending these last 2 emergency declarations. The April 12th emergency declaration included 4 locations shown on the map on the right. 3 locations on the South Interceptor in Oakland, Kennedy Street, Coliseum Way, and East 8th Street, and 1 location on the Alameda Interceptor in Buena Vista Avenue. After we discovered the sinkhole in Kennedy Street, we undertook a rapid assessment with the help of a consultant to identify other areas of the interceptor system that could lead to more sinkholes. That's how we included the Coliseum Way, East 8th Street, and Alameda repairs for a total of 4 locations under this emergency. Now for the December 13th emergency declaration. This included repairs at 1 location on the North Interceptor in Berkeley at 2nd Street and University Avenue, shown on the map on the right. We had identified it as a location of interest for follow-up, and when we were able to enter the interceptor for further inspection, we discovered it was in critical condition. Here's a little background on the district's interceptor system. We have approximately 30 miles of large diameter reinforced concrete interceptor pipelines. They're approximately 70 years old, and certain segments are now showing signs of advanced corrosion from hydrogen sulfide, which is released as a gas from the raw sewage and is converted to an acid on the surface of the pipe wall. We are seeing an increase in the rate of corrosion, but we're not sure exactly why. It could be due to water conservation, which increases the organic concentration, which in turn may increase hydrogen sulfide generation. Historically, we inspect and document the interceptors, usually by video, on a 5 to 10 year cycle. We've been doing capital projects to address corrosion and aging interceptors, but we plan to increase those efforts going forward. These pipelines are in the flatlands, deep in bay mud, in busy roadways, and many times freeway shoulders, so they are not easy to access for repairs. Next, I'll provide an overview of the corrosion and repairs included in the emergency declarations. I'll start with the 4 locations included in the April 12th emergency declaration. The first slide shows the Kennedy Street sinkhole site on the South Interceptor in Oakland. In the photo on the left, you can see where the pipe collapsed due to corrosion from the inside. There was a large diameter water pipeline directly overhead that had to be supported with the yellow straps. There was also an old gas main crossing, which is out of the photo. This could have been a much more serious failure. We made an immediate spot repair, and then we came back later and slip lined 300 feet for a more permanent repair, shown on the right. This is the Coliseum Way site on the South Interceptor, again in Oakland. You can see from the photo on the left that the crown of the pipe in this area was badly corroded down to the reinforcing steel. The interceptor was in such bad shape that parts of the pipe collapsed during the excavation for an access pit. On the right, you can see the slip lining repair operation, which included a critical segment where the interceptor passes under Seminary Creek. The interceptor at this site was particularly deep and a busy roadway. For the 8th Street location, you can see the corrosion on the top right photo. We pre-purchased 1,000 feet of slip lining pipe to get a jump on the long lead times needed for fabrication and delivery, and the slip lining for this location was completed in April. For the Alameda Interceptor, we slip lined approximately 4,000 feet of pipeline. This was the biggest project. On the left, you can see a representative photo of the corroded pipeline from the inside. In the right 2 photos, you can see the slip lining repairs. It took us almost 5 months to get this pipe fabricated and delivered. We closed down about 1.5 miles of Buena Vista Avenue in one direction to stage pipe and equipment. And note that we were able to work in the wet weather, so we worked over the winter. I also want to note that there was a 2-month effort to remove sand and debris from the interceptor in this area before we could slip line. This project was also required that we set up carbon scrubbers and chemical dosing to minimize odors. This is the 4th location included in the April 12th emergency declaration. This slide provides an overview of the December 13th emergency declaration on the North Interceptor in Berkeley. On the left, you can see where a district inspector was able to put his finger through what was left of the pipe wall. Luckily, it was a localized segment of corrosion. This location was also in a busy street and traffic was impacted for 4 months. For this site, we were able to slip line around a tight curve with specially fabricated short segments of slip lining pipe shown in the right 2 photos. This is a summary of the project costs. Total costs for the repairs for the 2 emergency declarations is $17.3 million, 15.5 for the April 12th declaration and 1.8 for the December declaration. The repairs in Buena Vista Avenue in Alameda were by far the greatest undertaking. So again, today, we are notifying the board that the emergency interceptor repairs are complete, and we recommend that the board approve the separate resolutions to end the 2 emergency declarations. And finally, next steps and acknowledgements. Next steps include updating the interceptor master plan and moving ahead with a number of capital projects. The master plan includes additional interceptor and manhole inspection, reviewing possible chemical addition to address hydrogen sulfide and minimize corrosion, updating our interceptor hydraulic model, developing recommendations for cleaning and maintenance of the interceptor system, and prioritizing the next capital projects. We have a number of capital projects in the works. In fiscal year 24-25 cycle, we have budgeted $23 million for design and construction of a number of interceptor projects. We are also in the second year of the SD 404 Special Structures Rehab Phase 1 project, in which we are making repairs at 3 locations on the South Interceptor. Lastly, we'd like to acknowledge the many people that helped us complete these emergency repairs. In particular, we'd like to acknowledge the 2 contractors, J&B Construction Company and Malad & Buntage Construction Company, who worked collaboratively and tirelessly with the district, cities, agencies, and the public. There are so many others that also deserve acknowledgement. The cities of Oakland, Alameda, and Berkeley were very accommodating with the district and the contractors. Also, we couldn't have done it without the residents and businesses at each site. The construction disrupted traffic, parking, and general access, but these communities were all very understanding and helpful. And lastly, I can't say enough about the many individuals and departments across the district who contributed and worked together to help us complete these emergency repairs. This concludes our presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Director Coleman.
Yeah, a couple of quick questions. Thank you for the presentation. So you've done an analysis of all our other interceptors, or to a large degree, the other interceptors. And what do we, and I know you have a $23 million capital project, I think it was stated in here for that purpose. How many are in dire straits in the next 5 years? Do you have, or do you have you're gonna develop a plan, I know that, but we obviously never wanna see an emergency, and we don't wanna see like next year during the rains, all of a sudden, we have collapse of the interceptors again. So are we going to work now on some of the interceptors that we've seen that are in bad shape?
Yes, we as part of the Kennedy, the April 12th declaration, we went out and looked at other areas and we identified areas with severe corrosion. And so that's where we had 4 locations that we added to that were very severe. And so then going forward, we have 4 other projects coming right up that we're looking at. And they are the next level of prioritizing or prioritized projects. So we have a priority list of the interceptors and where we're going next. So we do have a plan. And then with our master plan update, we're going to be looking at that even in more detail and looking at the priorities of these interceptors.
Okay, and one last question on this. Are we looking at putting any inserts in the interceptors so we don't have to dig up the streets, have a lot of trench spoil issues, and minimize the cost?
Mm-hmm. Well, the repairs that we've done so far are these slip lining repairs, where we insert a pipe within the interceptor And that is our main
Okay.
method of repairs to date.
So that's normally what we do? That is normally what we do, or that's
We
what
have
we're
a
doing
couple-
now?
We have a couple of different methods
Uh-huh.
of addressing the corrosion, and that's one of them. There's another method where we put a sock in the pipe. It's called CIPP. But anyway, so there's a
I know
couple of
we've done
different
it
methods.
with some water transmission lines. I didn't know we were doing it with some of these lines. That's great.
Yeah, I think it started with the sewer line, so.
Okay, thank you.
Whoops. There it goes. I was just on the map. Could you just remind us what the red and blue and yellow dots are on the diagram on slide 17?
Okay. Yeah, I believe this is something from planning, and I believe these are the
Brian.
areas.
Brian, maybe go back to the slide first, so everybody can see it. That one, yes.
Yeah.
There we go, sorry. Yes, this is a GIS map of our Interceptor system. This is taken from our GIS map, and so the red areas are areas of where we've identified some critical issues, so.
Okay, so it sort of goes to John's question. And then the blue and green, I guess?
Right,
Blue, green, and white?
Yeah, they're of lower priority. But this is part of what we're doing, updating this GIS system with the master plan update. And we're tracking these. We have videos of these areas, and we track them. Yeah.
Right, I mean, I know it feels like we've been presented with this in a planning committee meeting or something.
During the infrastructure workshop?
Okay. Yeah, if you could we get a short, something that just has a key of what these are and what it means?
We could do that.
Thank you. Glad that we've gotten the repairs done. Hopefully we don't encounter any other emergencies in the near future of this sort.
So we have two items for the board to
I'll
consider.
move that we adopt ending the 2 emergency orders.
It's been moved by Director Young and seconded by Director Patterson to adopt items 12.1 and 12.2. Seeing no further discussion or any public comment, I will call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No? Abstain? Motion carries.
Thank you, Brian. So moving on to the general manager's report. Last December, after almost 3 years, the district ended its COVID-19 emergency declaration. California ended its COVID emergency in February, and the federal government last month. Today, we'll share with you the COVID-19 laws and regulations that remain in effect, the presence of COVID in the community and at the district, and changes to our protocols. And we have Dave Briggs here, our Director of Operations and Maintenance, to provide the update.
Okay, good afternoon, President Katz, members of the board. Thank you, Clifford. So as Clifford was alluding to, in many aspects, COVID has moved to the background, but it's still definitely part of the landscape. And as we get halfway through 2023, many of these changes have taken in effect in the last 6 months. So we've seen the emergency declarations, many regulations, many laws, many safety protocols have now melted away. But I did want to highlight one here, that the state required paid leave expired on January 1st, as we've reported before. But it's certainly easier to tell you on this next slide what is still in effect than to list the things that have been rescinded at this point, because there's very little that's still in play. And actually, California may be the only state with anything left. It's kind of hard to tell because, as the board is aware, there was never really a uniform federal policy with COVID in terms of the safety protocols, aside from CDC guidance. So certain states were doing things or not doing things. But there were other other jurisdictions that were passing safety protocols, even school districts and municipalities. So it was really a patchwork across the country. But as near as we can tell, California is the only state that has anything left at this point. So what are those specific measures, or be it law or regulation? Right now, California employers are still liable for work-based transmission of COVID. That liability will remain for another 6 months or so and expires on January 1st, 2024, under certain conditions. If there is a work-based transmission, that makes employees eligible for workers' comp pay because COVID is treated as an industrial injury under this law. Cal OSHA is still active. There's many regulations that still affect us as employers. We still have to do contact tracing, albeit it's much simpler than it used to be. We still have to do it. And employees are still excluded from the workplace if they're COVID positive. OSHA still has definitions of what an outbreak is and what it isn't. It used to be 3 positives at a work site within a 14-day period. Last week, that changed to 7 days. So we don't have, as of today, I do not believe we have any active outbreaks at East Bay MUD work sites. One, I think, just expired today. But moving forward, that threshold is going to be a lot harder to trigger because the period has been compressed to only 7 days to trigger 3 positives. But these are really the short list of things that are still part of our lives as we manage COVID today. Looking at the numbers in the community, so this is a chart showing COVID virus concentrations with our own wastewater treatment plant. There have been many ups and downs over the past year or so. For the past couple of months, it's been low, not zero, but low. This is predominantly the XBB subvariant strain, which is derived from the Omicron variant. So it's still out there, but it has been low for at least a couple months now. And there is still a lot of data on the web related to COVID testing and positives and positivity rates, but that data is honestly getting less and less useful every day that goes by because the number of tests that are reported keeps going down. Very few tests are reported anymore, so there's not a lot of data, even though it is on the web, although that will probably, it's very expensive to maintain these databases at the county level and at the state level, and with the federal funding going away, I think a lot of the data on the web will go away with it. But the wastewater monitoring will remain. This has proven to be a very effective and early warning indicator of community infections. So I think even when COVID truly does go into the background for good, this will be just one of our early warning, ongoing mechanisms that we will always have to get an early jump on things happening. And that's, if there's any good aspect of the pandemic that's come out of this, I think it's been the advancement of this science. As I mentioned, the XBB variant is not only prevalent in our community, but also worldwide and nationally. Since it is derived from Omicron, it is highly transmittable, but luckily not very virulent. Hospitalization and death rates with this strain are low, but as the board is probably also aware, interpreting some of this data is not easy because when people enter the hospital and are COVID positive, it's not always clear based on the reportable data whether they're there because of COVID or for some other reason and just happen to have COVID at the same time. But overall, the rates are very, very low, even though those statistics tend to get confused sometimes. So at the district, as has been the case for many months now, we're generating about 1 positive case a day. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 0. Very few employees are unable to work or telework because of the virus. That's good. You might recall, I looked earlier today, in January of 2022, we had over 100 employees that were unable to work or telework because of COVID. And roughly over 5% of our workforce was not at work, not able to make a contribution to our work because of COVID, and now it's a handful. So it's still active, it's still in our community, it's still a problem, but it's far more manageable. Most employees have a lot of sick leave on the books. Most of them have over 40 hours accumulated, plus vacation on top of that. Technically, no employee has 0 hours, but that's really an artifact of the database that I checked. Each employee generates or accrues 4 hours of sick leave every pay period. So technically, they don't always have 0, or very few of them have 0. But about 36 employees who are unable to telework, so our employees who are out in the field constructing and maintaining our water system and wastewater system, about 36 of those employees have about 8 hours or less of sick leave on the books. So there are some employees that would have to use sick leave that they have left or borrow sick leave. That mechanism is still in place at the district. If employees do run out of sick leave, they can borrow it and pay it back later through accrued sick leave or vacation. That's what they would use if they did have to isolate for COVID at this point. The changes in our safety protocols have not really been significant, and none of these are really attributed to any change in state law or regulation. These are all, as I said, relatively minor, and they are simply us getting a little bit less conservative, reflective, in reflection of the state of the virus these days. So these changes have been discussed with the unions, and we notified employees, I think, last week or the week before. They'll go into effect later this week. We have reduced the hotline availability. That means on weekends, we're no longer staffing it. There's nothing that's that urgent that we need to take care of over the weekend that can't wait till Monday morning. We now only want employees to call the hotline when they're COVID positive. So for a couple of years, or probably since the beginning of the pandemic, we wanted to know if you were symptomatic. We wanted to know if you might have COVID, and we wanted you to call the hotline and get into our database and our contact tracing as a conservative measure, but we're no longer doing that. We only want employees who are COVID positive to call the hotline. And essentially, if you're sick, stay home like you would before the pandemic and use your sick leave. If you do have COVID-like symptoms, take a test. And if it's positive, call the hotline and we'll enter you into the protocol and ask you to isolate or tell you to isolate from work and tell you for at least 5 days. So yeah, these are all changes that have taken effect or will take effect later this week. And then moving forward from here, as you've seen, there's not much left, but right now we're just going to wait to see if anything changes at OSHA or at the state law or with state law before we make any changes from here. So that's where we are. We're kind of in a holding pattern and maintain the status quo until something happens at the state level. And thank you. I'll take any questions from here.
Andy?
Director Young?
Does confirmed test mean an antigen test, a home antigen test, or a PCR test?
Either.
Either, but an antigen, the home version's fine, quick
Yeah,
test.
that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple quick comments. So it's good to see the report about our protocols being stable and how we're managing that. And I do think it would be helpful to monitor the way we have always had clinics available for our employees for flu vaccination. We might find opportunities to engage our employees at their own choice for the updated vaccines so that we can encourage our employees to be up to date, which does seem like a measure that will be beneficial to employees as a whole to keep our employees safe and to reduce cases if we do have eventual waves. But that it remains to be seen if providers will be able to staff those clinics. But I just encourage reaching out to see if our flu clinic providers are anticipating combined clinics and to see if that would be possible. I think it's great that we've supported some local health jurisdictions to be able to have separate monitoring for their own evaluation for equity purposes within the community. I think that's been great that we've assisted some local health jurisdictions with those efforts. And this remains something that is still with us and deserves some monitoring. And I think having these issues reviewed it was helpful to me to understand how we're dealing with it. Thank you.
That's the end of my reports, and at your places is a speaker's bureau. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Okay, we move to reports and director comments. Are there any comments from the members of the public on these items?
Isn't it planning? Sorry, the committee reports?
Yes, we are, I was calling for general public comment on the item first, and since I don't see any, we'll move to committee reports. The minutes from the June 13th, 2023 Planning Committee and Legislative Human Resources Committee were included in the agenda materials. We will now receive an update from this morning's Sustainability Committee and Finance Administration Committee meetings. For Sustainability, Director Young.
Good morning, or good afternoon. The Sustainability Committee met this morning and heard two items. An update on our energy projects, just exciting stuff that we're looking at doing to keep moving us forward on solar, and the biggest one is the Duffel project in my ward, which is getting close to being online. An in-conduit hydro project that we're in partner, I guess you could call it partnership with, in Piedmont, and a lease that we're doing at the wastewater treatment plant with a hydrogen fuel provider. So an array of projects. And then the second item we had was about looking at our energy policy, primarily having to do with how we are meeting our goal of being carbon neutral or net zero by 2030 in the case of water, and 2040 in the case of wastewater, and have asked staff to review our decision-making around what we purchase, to go to directly purchasing zero-emission power where we can, while still keeping an eye on our wallet for those when we need to do that. So I don't think I have anything out. That policy will either come back to the Sustainability Committee or possibly to Finance for review before coming to the full board.
Thank you, Director Young. And Director Patterson.
Yes, let me give it a little tap. Yes, the Finance and Administration Committee met this morning. We had two principal items: the monthly investment transaction report. Of course, everybody knows May is a big month when we pay on our bonds and those things that we take out. So there was an outlay of money that went. We also had, as a part of that, a report on the revisions of district policies. These two items were on the consent agenda, item 9 and 10. And so they were recommended coming forth, and they have been approved in previous action today. And that's the report.
Thank you, Director Patterson. Please submit items for future consideration to the General Manager, and we move to Director comments. Thank you. If you have already submitted your written comments to the Secretary, are there any verbal Director comments or reports? Director Chan?
I need to ask if at the next meeting on July 7th that there be no Ward 7 business. That's because I'm actually not going to be in the country, but I'm not going to be on vacation either. I'm going to be on a delegation with the United States Department of State. And so I will be out of the country. I will try and call in. I think Risha and I have discussed it. But just in case I cannot call in, I'm asking that nothing regarding Ward 7 specifically, a specific Ward 7 issue, not be on the agenda.
Any other Director comments?
Yeah.
Director Young?
I had the pleasure of joining our general manager and folks from our ranger and public affairs staff, as well as a number of people from the community, and on one of our water walks last Saturday at San Pablo Reservoir and learned a lot about how the dam was built and what we're doing to make sure that it's safe. And just would also say that we're developing quite a little cadre of followers who are coming out on, seems like many of them were repeats. Some said, oh, I had to miss one. And so I think that's great. And I'd also like to really see us trying to expand who are the folks that are participating on these. So it's not I know there's a limited number of people that we can accommodate, but it'd be really nice to be introducing more people to, more of the agency. So I'm excited to see them continue. I'm glad that we're committing to their continuation. I would just really, really, really like to see us taking some effort to get some other folks on these walks and hikes. But that was
Who are other
was great.
folks? Other folks?
Other folks than the people that have been coming to each and every one.
Are you talking about like you want families to start coming with their kids?
Sure. That's, but I basically mean that the people that have been there are a number of people that have attended several of these walks who are repeat visitors, right? I'd like to see more of the 1.4 million, different parts of the 1.4 million customers that we serve on the hikes, that's all.
Are there space limitations, Marguerite?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're limited to like 30 people or something like that for the most part.
So most of them are 35, just because it's very difficult to manage a large group. When we did the Skyline Gardens, I think it was limited to 15, just because it's a more difficult one to do. We're going to be doing some other ones that just access-wise is hard, so we do limit it to 35 for most of the events. But we're going to be repeating it next year, so I would imagine those that went this year probably won't come back for the same walk next year, and we'll get some more people. I did hear from some of the people that were at the event. We do put the information out on Nextdoor, and they said that was a very effective way for them to learn about it. But we also know that these things sell up fairly quickly. So the people who have participated, they know to sign up very quickly. I think the first one we did, I was told, and Kelly could probably correct me, but the one at Upper San Leandro Reservoir, I think it opened at midnight and sold out in 5 minutes. So it went very quickly.
That's great that it's so popular. Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing how we can maximize participation and experience of it. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned, and the next regular meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, July 11th at 1:15 p.m.